I was just trying to get people that were tangential to Ruby and other people, and also there's a lady I met. I spoke in El Dorado, Arkansas, because my mother graduated from there, and the last time I spoke on Schoolboy Row, who she went to high school with, and I donated some books in my mother's honor at the library, the public library. And so I met the librarian. Her family, her parents, her dad was a musician. They were at Ruby's club the night before the assassination. So, and they maintained that one of the Secret Service men was out partying and not taking care of what he was supposed to be taking care of. So anyway, now he would probably have not been there because he spent the night in Fort Worth. The night, isn't that right, Paul? The night before he spent the night in Fort Worth and drove to Dallas that morning because they had a tailgate speech or something like that. Let me say this. I asked a number of people to come. One I haven't heard from. I haven't heard from Mitch Gibson. I don't know what's up with that. I don't know what to think. Gail Beal is usually a very responsible person. There must be some really big reason why she's not here now. Gail is a friend of Bill Moyer's, and she was a very good friend of Archie McDonald's, and she knew personally Lady Bird Johnson because when they dedicated the Tucker Native Plant Center, Lady Bird was there that day, and I was going to go meet her, and I never could get up there. But she knew her very well, and she lives in Marshall. I don't know if she's a native or not, but as you know, Lady Bird's family was from Karnak. Her name was Taylor before that. So anyway, the guys that I was referred to Paul Chachere by a good friend of mine named Ben Smith. Now, Ben Smith is the son-in-law of Joe Tonnahill, who was the lawyer that helped Melvin Belli defend Jack Ruby from Jasper. I did not know this until I called. I had hoped someone from Jasper would be here to talk about Tonnahill. But in the museum at Jasper, they have things from Tonnahill's office in the museum down there. I've been through that, and I confess I didn't notice that. But, Ben told me about Paul Chachere. He said, Dickie, Paul knows more than the people that committed it, you know. So he had really high regard for Paul, and Paul's been doing it 40 years. Stanley comes from a little different direction. Stanley was a history teacher in a high school, was it? Yeah, Leesville High School for 30 years, 31 years, and he spoke on the ferries on the Sabine River, and very knowledgeable. And so anyway, but lest I steal the thunder of my vice president, Jane, you want to come up here and finish the introduction that I started, sort of? Okay.
I think we've already had a little bit of introduction of you, Stanley Fletcher. And as Dickie has said, Stanley, you're from Leesville, Louisiana, and you're a retired school teacher for 31 years of teaching in high school and college, and you have taught social studies. So we welcome you. We're glad to have you taking part with us to discuss the Kennedy assassination. And we also have Paul. I can't pronounce that. Tell me how to pronounce your last name. Chachere. That's a Cajun last name, right? Well, you say, or Paul has given us some remarks about himself. He says he's just an old country Cajun druggist from Church Point, Louisiana, in the Acadia Parish. He graduated from Kinder High School in 1967, graduate of Northeast Louisiana University with a BS in pharmacy in 1972. He's owned and operated pharmacies in Louisiana for 20 years. He was defeated for the U.S. Congress in 1996. He worked in over 50 towns in Texas and Louisiana for the last 20 years. This is about his story. I think the story he's going to tell us was given to him by a retired state policeman from the 1930s. So we look forward to hearing what you have to say, Stanley and Paul. We welcome y'all.
Thank you. You believe killed Kennedy and why? Okay.
Okay, but let me get you started with Dickie, why I got involved. In 1978, a man comes to the drugstore. It's in the summer. My drugstore was in Manny, Louisiana, which is on Toledo Bend. And the man was looking for something for poison ivy. Well, in Manny, it's a little small town, I guess about the size of A.B. Huntington, so the people knows all the people back. In the 1978, in the 70s, Toledo Bend was at its height, and people would come from all over the country. They would come from Dallas, Little Rock, up north and all, and they would come to the drugstore. My drugstore was before the Walmarts ever came into the town, and I was inside of a discount store, so we was open on Saturdays, and a lot of tourists would come into the store. So here comes this man on one Saturday afternoon looking for something for poison ivy. So I asked the man, it's like I asked some of the people here today, where you come from? And I learned that back from Church Point. I'm a Cajun, and I had a friend of mine was an old barber, and the barber would always ask people about your family, anybody else. And if you grew up in a small town, the drugstore was the center of all attractions for all people. I worked in the 1990s. Later on, I worked here in Thompson's Pharmacy and Medical Discount. Thompson was, with the hamburgers and the whole stuff, and people would come to the drugstores. It's kind of like a different game of today. Anyway, the man comes in. I said, where you come from? He says, he looks at me, and he's kind of dressed like I am today, because most people wore them leisure suits back in them days, and they would come, kind of casual. But he's pretty well dressed on a Saturday afternoon. And he says, what does that have to me, son? And calls me son, and at the time, I was probably in my later 20s. And this is going to be 40 years ago. And he says, son, what does that have to do with me buying something for poison ivy? Now, if y'all all know, y'all go to the drugstore, the mom and dads was always more personable people. The chain gangs, which I worked for the last 20 years, could care less. They got to get the prescription out, and they don't get too involved. You live in a small town, you want to know what's going on. And so I asked the old man, where was he from? He said, it has nothing to do with me buying the deals. I said, I'm going to get him. I said, well, you on food stamps or welfare? Oh, that's going to really get him. He's going to say, oh. He said, you remind me of the Gestapo in the war. I said, I am the Gestapo. He says, you remind me of a guy diarrhea of the mouth. I said, I'd rather have diarrhea of the mouth than poison ivy in your butt. And I get a smile out of him. He says, son, if you'll shut up for 3 minutes, I'll tell you 3 stories. It was on a Saturday, it wasn't busy, and I said, go ahead, Daddy, go ahead. And he called me son. He says, first of all, what you know about Bonnie and Clyde? And I said, well, sir, I asked my grandma in the 1950s about Bonnie and Clyde. She said, Paul, when Mr. Ventures comes to see your Aunt Nola, who my uncle married before the war in 41, ask him. Said, we don't trust anybody past the Mason-Dixon line. The Mason-Dixon line in the great state of Louisiana is from Alexandria to Pineville. And that's the deal. And my grandma married one. I married to Tina for 48 years. And basically, I've never trusted her. And anyway, in the meantime, when after I got married, she had to come back with Cajun, so she had to learn how to cook. But anyway, so she says, when Mr. Ventures comes, ask him. She says, I went to the 2nd grade. My grandma had to learn how to speak English to speak to me. We're the real Cajuns. There's very few of us left in the world. Anyway, in the meantime so I asked Mr. Ventures. Mr. Ventures owned the drugstore in Gibson, Louisiana, back in, and like I'm telling y'all the man story, back in the 1930s. And when I asked Mr. Ventures that back in the 50s, he says, Paul, I wasn't like you. I was a little boy, but I would always ask a lot of questions. He said, Clyde Barrow came into his pharmacy, but he kept his mouth shut. Didn't ask him no questions like me, because the barber shop was right by him. So I'm telling that to the old man. The man says, I'm retired from the state police, son. I said, well, that's nice. He said, I was on the motorcycle in Bossier City when I let Barrow and Bonnie pass through, where the Texas Ranger, Frank Hammer, and those deputies are going to kill him in cold blood. And that's all he tells me. He said, story number 2, what you know about the Long assassination? I said, look, sir, I don't like the Longs. I own a drugstore in Winfield, Louisiana, which went at the time, 78. I own in Manny and in different towns. And I said, Huey Long was from there, and I said, Earl Long, and they had like 3 years. He said, you know what a bank shot is, son? I said, a bank shot in basketball or a bank shot in pool? He said, the bank shot. And he said, it wasn't the little Jewish guy that was behind the shot. It was the guys behind him. Next time you go to the Capitol, which is in Baton Rouge, look for the shot into the marble, into the bank shot. Just follow the shot. Number 3 says, son, where were you at when Kennedy got killed? I said, oh, yeah, it was in 1963. We built a new school. I went to high school in Kinder. And in 1961, we built a new high school out of town, inside the town. And then we had and when this happens was around dinner time. And so I'm going, and we've got to march with your class, and you've got to march into the lunchroom. So I'm telling the man. And I said, we passed by the library before you get to the lunchroom. And my neighbor, who's now a retired nurse and all back, she and a couple of girls was sophomores at the time. I was a freshman, and they're crying inside the library. So I said, Martha, what happened here? What you crying about? They just killed President John Kennedy. I said, Martha, what did they eat in the lunchroom? I care less about Kennedy. I didn't care about Kennedy. Kennedy, just a little bit about me. I'm Catholic, and of course John Kennedy was a Roman Catholic, and so and he was a Democrat. But we from the real South, and the Cajuns back, even at nothing against the Toms back. We didn't like Kennedy and a lot of the things he was involved with. One was the segregation things back, because I could hear my old uncle and other people back when I'd go visit with him in church point after I went to Kinder, would talk about segregation and the rest of it. So I would just listen to him talk. Anyway, he said, son, I retired from the state police in the late 50s. In the 60s, I went to Dallas. I was working in an investigation about a case. I went to Ruby's place, the Carousel, and the other place, Weinstein's, another Jewish guy had some. You could get more information about the streets, about finding somebody by going to the clubs. He said, well, by the way, son, 2 of the bodies was found floating, one by Logansport, Louisiana, who was eavesdropping me on my story. And he said the second body was found by Lannan, which I'm thinking about buying a camp. He says, son, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to challenge you to solve all 3 stories. And he says, follow the women and follow the money, and you're going to come to all the deals. Very few people can solve it, but I figure you, being like a Gestapo guy, will solve the case. That's in 1978. 20 years passed by. 1996, I'd run for Congress. I told God wanted me to be in healthcare, and that's the only thing is in healthcare. So that, and then I coached the league and all, and the kids couldn't have no jobs in Manning, so I decided to take it on. Bad move. And the guy, just like landslide, Lyndon Johnson, I get beat pretty bad by the Republican guy. But I learned a lot about politics. In fact, in politics, the only time I think I voted in 1968 in this race, for the governor against Taddy Aycock and some others back, because me and my wife went out to a gumbo, and this guy had the best gumbo, so I tell my wife, he cooks so well, we're going to have to vote for this guy. His name was C.C. Taddy Aycock. But in 1960, I was again involved because my old stepfather was a union guy. He was with the Democratic Party and all, and I got involved in pushing these cards in the 1960 gubernatorial race for the governorship. So that I had too much to deal with politics and all. And after I got beat in 1996, I decided I was going to come to a place called the University of Texas and get me a degree, a master's degree in business. But I stopped in Lufkin, Texas. And in Lufkin, Texas, I went to work for James Yates, and I worked at Thompson Drugs. And then in 1998, I have a dream. This is not no BS. In my dream, kind of like Martin Luther King, in my dream, and I just came from my farm today in Pelican. In my dream, Lyndon Johnson comes in a big old black 1960-something Cadillac. And then he's in the front seat, and Lady Bird Johnson is in the other side of the seat, and then there's a boy in the back seat. Johnson looks at me in a kind of astonishment to look at me for whatever reason. Maybe to solve whatever he's got. Maybe he's got guilt on his mind or what. And it kind of haunted me all these years, because then I'd taken the job. I left James, and a guy from Eckerd Drugs offers me a job to go to Center, Texas. So in my deal in Center, Texas, I start telling some people about this story and some of the dream. And a guy comes up in this Eckerd Drugs in Center, and he lets everybody moves away, and he says, Paul, I want to tell you something nobody else knows in town. He's a business guy, this guy was. He said, my mama's sister was Clyde Barrow's mama. My mama's sister was Clyde Barrow's mama. There's more to this story about your story. Another guy was eavesdropping down the hall, and he's a lawyer. And the lawyer was in 11/22/63 was there. He was at the parade, but he wasn't really there. He was fixing to go deal. He was from the panhandle of Texas, and he was sent to TCU by Paul Laxalt. He had worked as an aide to Paul Laxalt before going to college. And Paul Laxalt was once a governor of the great state of Nevada. Later, he's going to become a senator in Nevada. Paul Laxalt's best friend is a guy named Robert Mayhew. Robert Mayhew's a guy associated with a fellow by the name of Howard Hughes. And so him and Hughes, we got to know each other because birds of a feather fly together in the political world, and he deals back. So he says, come see me in my house one day. We'll drink some bourbon. We will tell you more about your story. So me and the guy who was once a federal prosecutor, later becomes an attorney, a defense attorney, becomes pretty good friends. He's now deceased. So then I worked for Eckerd's, and Eckerd's is not going to send me. We have the shortage of pharmacists, and now they're going to start sending me to different places. So from center, it takes me all over Texas. But in the meantime, was of the shortage of pharmacists in the early 2000s, and so I had people booking me from Dallas, Houston, Chicago, and Mississippi, and I went out to West Texas. In the meantime, was I'm assigned to go do a job with Eckerd's in Pittsburgh, Texas. And I'm telling some people about this story, and they said, you ought to get in touch with this man. His name is Tague, T-A-G-U-E. So I called Tague, and then he comes by the drugstore. He had a crazy old girlfriend. She was an old pole dancer from Dallas, and Tague invites me over to his house. And Tague has all these books. He said, you ever heard of me? I said, no, who are you? He says, I'm James Tague. I'm the guy that changed the magic bullet theory. I said, well, that's nice. I don't know nothing about the magic theory. I just had that challenge by it. So, man, I don't know nothing about Kennedy. And he says, here's 2 books you need to read. One, Seth Kanner's book. Seth Kanner was a journalist in Dallas, and then later he writes his book about the Ruby and the cover-up of Jack Rubenstein. The second book he gives is a book called A Texan Looks at Lyndon. J. Evetts Haley, Canyon Press, 1964. So I'm kind of looking in the book and not too much, and I get assigned to a place in Dallas on Mockingbird Avenue. And I decide at the time, I wanted to go to Texas Book Depository, not to go look. I wanted the records on Jack Rubenstein. Why? I'm a pharmacist, and I can read medicine, I can read people. I've had that gift for a long, long time. People, I could think about someone that would come to the drugstore, and then you filling medicines for the people, you get to know a lot of people, and you know what problems they have by the medications they have, and you know people. Because remember, I was trained by an Italian guy, kind of a mobster. I had to bootleg early in my career, and also I learned the tricks of somewhat of the trades from the streets. Anyway, back, I want to go see the records, and this guy, Gary Mack, he's the curator of the museum. I have to see him in the bottom, he's in the basements. I didn't care about nothing about the shots and all. I wanted Ruby's records, and because I'd written Kanner's book. Now, Rubenstein, like you're going to have all this stuff on the stuff, and you can read all about him this time. So I have now followed Ruby more than anybody else. I talked to his crazy brother Earl 2 or 3 times before it is. I have followed just about everybody, and God has brought me to all these people involved in these towns. I told Dickie I'm friends with Oswald's wife, Marina. She's a pharmacist like me. She is from Russia. So me and her have dealt for 20 years. One of the deals I gave Mr. Smith was, again, she gave me a box. She gave up on the assassination back in about 2006. When I was coming out of West Texas, I met with her husband, Kenneth, who's from La Mesa. I worked all them towns. I worked Seminole, I worked Odessa, Midland, and all these towns. So, but anyway, back to Gary Mack when I was there, I want the records. He makes me wear some gloves, and I have to go down, and I'm down in the barn in the basement. I said, I want Ruby's records. I want Ruby's records from his time in the Dallas County Jail to his time at Parkland. And then I had to see what medications he was on, but also what Ruby was involved with. Ruby was homosexual in nature. He was not really a straight guy. But anyway, it had nothing to do with this. He was reading two books. One was Stag Magazine. The second was A Texan Looks at About Lyndon by J. Evetts Haley. If you study Jack Rubenstein back, he tells some of the answers. He's going to try and go why he decides to shoot Lee Harvey Oswald on the 24th of deals. I watched that shooting personally. Me and my old man was watching watching this show on TV, and I always liked it. And that was about the Kingfisher. It's called Amos and Andy. When they interrupted the show, and they could have moved the man who so-called killed John Fitzgerald Kennedy, Lee Harvey Oswald, moving from the Dallas City Jail to the county jail, and I saw Rubenstein shoot him live. And so it kind of stayed with me all these years back. But I want to know how Rubenstein is going to get eliminated. And then it took me some years, but I found how they eliminated Jack Ruby. So if you start off with Ruby and you kind of go back down, and you can work the whole case. But the case has baffled me for 40 years. So I'm going to get assigned for these people from Dallas, nothing to do with this kind of deal. They're going to send me to a place called Alice, Texas. So I get over there and I ask one of the girls back who's talking to me for me, and everybody's saying they're Mexican. There's no Mexican. They're all Indians. They all come from Native Americans over here. Anyway, she says, I asked her, what is Alice, Texas good for? Well, she says Box 13. Something flips in my mind because I read some of that book. I just scanned through Evans Haley's book in Box 13. And that's mentioned in Box 13. So the girl was typing when she says, my grandma is one of them they use on Box 13 that came from the cemetery. I said, oh. So now I'm going to get more involved about Alice, Texas. So I found out the guy was in 1948 the district attorney. I wanted him to know because he's part of the cover-up. And I found him. I found his name. He was 90 years old. And his crazy daughter gave me a hard time. And she wouldn't let me go see him, but I ain't going to be denied. Remember about the challenge, and I'm a Cajun. So I've got one of them old Indian girls to take me over to the judge's house, the retired, he became the lawyer's house. And I get in, and then I'm talking to him, and the old daughter calls. He calls the police in the big city of Alice, Texas. So I'll leave, something says, get up and go, don't go. I hid inside the Catholic church. Again, I'm Catholic, and old Jesus takes care of me. And later on, they try to blackball me. So this is Alice, Texas. So I knew there was more, but I was also, there was a guy named George B. Poore. George B. Poore is called the Duke of Duval. He's the guy who's going to switch the whole thing and the whole election. But you know, the great city of Lufkin is also kind of what involved because Judge Mantuk and some of those in the Democratic Party evolved to win this election in 1948. I showed Mr. Smith, if they don't steal the election in 1948, there's not going to be no parade on 11/22/63. And there's not going to be an Obama in 2008. All the facts. These are the facts. I became friends with a guy who's involved with Box 13. This is what Haley attacks a fellow by the name of Billy Saul Estes. And so, but Teague tells me he has written a book. Teague is telling me in his house, and he says, you got to go find Billy Saul. He says, a lot of people don't believe him and all, but he's going to maybe be your key of my challenge from the state policeman. So I'll go see, I'm working in West Texas, and I'm working by Brownswood. I worked all them towns, and I decided to go to Granbury, and I meet Billy Saul Estes. And I take out his wife, her name is Doris, and I take him out, for breakfast. And Billy says, come back, come eat in my house. I'm going to cook for you. And I thought, we was eating some pecan pie. He gets a big one. And I'm big too. And Billy eats half, and I eat the other half of the pecan pie. But me and Billy, and I get his book, and Mr. Smith has the book that he gets. And so, and then I don't think too much about it, but he tells me a lot. Me and Estes becomes real good friends throughout the years. In fact, when I worked in Pecos, Texas is where he gets in trouble with the Johnson administration, who they're going after little Bobby. He tells me that there was 40 FBI agents came to Pecos, Texas, and little Bobby Kennedy comes all the way to Pecos to see him. He wants him to rat on Lyndon. But like Billy Saul says, I ain't ratting on nobody because I know better than to rat because I'm a dead man walking. So then Billy goes up to the big house. They're going to send him up to the big house. All this has happened for 11/22/63. And I asked Billy, why didn't you talk? He said he killed 40. Well, when he was in Leavenworth, Billy Saul Estes' roommate was Beto Genevieve, the man that ran the syndicate in New York City. And he got word through, again, a barber involved. The barber tells him there's a hit for him, and he can move Billy Saul. So me and Billy Saul become pretty good friends. And one time I was working in Pecos, he says, go by his house. And then, so I started looking into it. And I said, one day I called him back. I said, Billy, I said, you owe a man $8.45. He said, what I owe him for? I said, he's the plate man. He was a Mexican guy who was the plate man, changed the plates with the commotion service. All this stuff, if Billy goes down, Lyndon goes down. Billy goes down, and he thinks that old Lyndon's going to take him out, but he can't. Lyndon's got to keep his mouth shut. All this leads to 11/22/63. People don't see why, but I'm going to give you both facts. So one day I was going to work in Monroe, where I went to college, and I'm fixing to call old Billy. I'm going to ask him about Pecos because at my farm I wanted to do cantaloupes. I was never successful with cantaloupes. Now Billy he never really grew anything. Billy was a hustler. I mean, hustle from day one. All them cantaloupes came about when he gave he would send cantaloupes to every politician and all, and he makes a lot of money in the deals back. And Billy's a character, though. Either Billy's going to be correct, and the tapes is what he said. The tapes is what keep him. When I'm trying to still get the tapes. So anyway, I'm going to Monroe back to do a gig with Rod Aid, and my phone rings, his cell phone. It's an 817 area code number, and I said, can I help you? He said, this is Joy. I said, are you Paul? I said, yeah, he says, this is Joy. We just found Daddy dead, and you're the first one we called. And I said, what can I do for you? He said, well, can you get in touch with Willie? I said, Willie who? He said, Willie Nelson, because I was friends with Ray Price. I fixed message for Ray Price, and Ray Price is in Mount Pleasant, Texas. And by the way, Ray Price's bodyguard was Richard Sims. Richard Sims was the last guy to interrogate Lee Harvey Oswald before that his Sunday with death, and that was late on Saturday night. So then, for some reason, I become friends with Oswald's wife, Marina. She's a pharmacist like me, and she was from Russia. So we hit up. Her life and my life kind of intertwined. And in 2006, when I was coming out of West Texas, her husband meets me, and he gives me 2 boxes. And it was all about the assassination, all the people who wrote to her and her whole life and all this other stuff. And the other day, I went back to Louisiana to form my wife, clean up at the junket office, and I came up with a manuscript that was given to her. Because a lot of people had sent her. And so you have to start studying mostly her life as she goes. I don't know if I'm jumping on all the questions back, but I'll try and get everything else. Lee Harvey Oswald is one of the things you have on. Lee Harvey Oswald, I studied him quite a bit because he's the guy who's going to be the so-called fall guy of the killing of Kennedy. Now, I have dealt with Marina for over 20 years. This ain't no book stuff. This is dealing with her. Not jumping off the deal. Jack Rubenstein, like I told you back, trusted only 2 people. I became friends with one of the 2. The other one guy was George Center. The other one was a guy from Noonsday, Texas, which is by Tyler. His name is Reagan Buddy Thurman. He was a prize fighter out of East Texas, and he fought Sonny Liston. And later on, he goes to the pen for a couple of times. Well, me and him became good friends. He's now dead. Anyway, that place, if you have to go to Tyler, you go to it's called the All Palace. I went to the All Palace. The All Palace was built for Buddy. It was the guy that owned the All Palace, a guy named Bobby Manziel. Bobby Manziel was a boxing promoter in the 1950s. He brings Jack Dempsey all the way to Tyler to train Buddy. Now, after Kennedy is killed on 11/22/63, 2.5 hours later, they pick up Buddy in Los Angeles. Buddy was once on I Love Lucy story, and also he was a collector for the Union, the AIG. And this is where, a lot of times they claim all the stuff was between the Union people. Buddy's best friend was a guy named Donlin, and Donlin was another collector. You either collect, you paid, or you win. But he was friends with, and he worked for Benny Binion. Benny Binion on the Horseshoe. That's in Las Vegas. Remember I told you about the connection with the Laxalts. You have to understand how Vegas made it. Vegas comes up strong after they shut down Havana, Cuba. Now, all these people are kind of involved back with it. And then again, like he told me one time, people didn't pay. We'd take a little walk out there into the desert, and Buddy would come back by himself. It really was. So these are really strong. The other factors back, we can go, and I did a lot of research back. I had a friend of mine with the FBI who brings down Carter's the little man Marcella in the 81 Bra Lab. This is not kind of related, but Marcella is the guy who's involved. And you can talk all the ones back. I can just spit them out. My cousin worked for these characters, was a cook for the Italians. But anyway, Carlos Marcella was deported from by the Kennedys. Kennedy's man picks him up and sends him up to Guatemala in 1961. Well, and he almost was killed there. And a guy from Shreveport was a lawyer to come back and get him. And they almost kill him and set him up. And else he comes back with a vengeance. Carlos Marcella never forgot what the Kennedys did to him. In 1960, in the 1960 election for president, Carlos gave $500,000 to Johnson and $500,000 to Tricky Dick Nixon. He didn't give none to the Kennedys because it goes back to Estes Kefauver in the 1957 deals when he goes after the mob. But if you study stronger, you got to go back to the 30s and 20s when John Kennedy's dad, he wasn't just an Irish guy, an Irish mob. He goes back to Hollywood and all the other stuff back. But he gets a vengeance too. He gets a vengeance against a fellow by the name of Franklin Roosevelt because he is sent home back in the time in England when he's an ambassador in England, and he's sent back to the United States. So in the time back he gets back, he wants one of his boys to get to the power. And his first son, Joseph, is killed in World War II. Now he's going to promote John Kennedy. There's a lot to John Kennedy a lot of people don't understand. and you have to understand politics. Remember I told you I ran in 1996. You have to understand how John Kennedy was first elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 1946. So if you study deep all this stuff, all this didn't come up on 11/22/63, and we decided we were going to shoot the president. So, but again, too, Kennedy has made a lot of people mad. He has made the mob mad because of the winning of the election in 1960, where he controls the deal in Chicago with Joseph Daley, the great mayor who's part of the Democratic Party deals back. And he forgets, Little Bobby is the guy that really causes the death of his brother, John Kennedy. Now, and Little Bobby later on, he's going to go down. I know I'm jumping on stories. Yeah.
He caused it because he was going after the mob?
That's just one of them.
Okay.
You understand? Little Bobby.
Yeah.
Little Bobby caused the demise. You should never mix family, friends, and all back with it. He makes him the Attorney General of the United States of America. Basically, you don't bring the family in there. Now they're controlling the presidency, and they're controlling the Justice Department and everything else.
And they also had Ted that was elected.
Ted is dead, and Ted's going to go down later. They're going to get rid of Ted later. Ted wins his thing, and the senator deals back in the same year that his brother's going to get killed. Later on with Ted, I had to study it, not necessarily so much, as people are involved with this stuff, and people come down to the drugstore and whatever from all over, and these the Massachusetts Bay back with it. And Ted Kennedy, now that I'm jumping on his, the Mary Jo Kopechne case. Ted Kennedy married a woman, I'm from Acadia Parish. John Kennedy first, I'm going to jump in 1959, comes to the Rice Festival in Acadia Parish in Crowley. And then he's brought in there by a guy, and Edwin Edwards, I'm jumping on this case, but Edwin Edwards is president of the Chamber of Commerce, and this guy Edmond Reggie is a judge. And they have him because Edmond Reggie is in the 1960 election, which is in Los Angeles. This is a very key, the 1960 election. Russell Long, let's see, what's his name? Which one of the Longs? Uncle Earl. Uncle Earl Long is the governor, and he's drunk with his old girlfriend back at the convention, and all. And he wants Johnson. He wants Johnson. He don't like Kennedy, but you have to understand who they are and who's his friends from Leander Perez and all. They don't want this guy Kennedy, but Earl gets drunk and he don't come back, and the rest of them cut a deal with the Kennedy faction. 60 elections is a key to this whole thing in Los Angeles. Anyway, in the meantime, back at OK Corral, after 60s and all back, he gets elected. But John Kennedy was not really part of the Bay of Pigs things, which is all part of the Cuban stuff back. He inherits that kind of deal, again, from Eisenhower and all the people that you have about Alan Dulles, I'm junking it back. They really want to get rid of Dulles and the CIA. Harry Truman says he's developed the wrong kind of deal. It's almost a kill of society. So now that I'm jumping back, I guess I am jumping back from port to port and all, and it's hard to keep track of all this stuff. So anyway, in the meantime I'm working all over Texas. So I'm at box 13. I'm working in Sulphur Springs, Texas. The guy comes in a big old diamond on his hand. And I said, where you come from? He said, I'm from Dallas. I said, you get that ring in a Cracker Jack box? He says, no. I said, what you do? He said, I'm retired from the Dallas City Police. And then I got to know his name back, and I looked back at my notes back. He was Tippett's partner at one time. J.D. Tippett from Bogota, Texas, I worked in Mount Pleasant, which Bogota is right by it. I studied J.D. Tippett and the killing of J.D. Tippett for a long time. I fixed medicine. I worked in a place. Close to there, and it was Hughes Springs, Texas. It's between Jefferson, Texas, and going to Mount Pleasant. And there I met a lot of different people. And I met one of Tippett's, J.D. Tippett's cousins. His Rubenstein was. He wasn't just a deals back. If you study the women, like the old man said, which I studied, I tried to heal Candy Bar the stripper. Candy Bar the stripper was friends with Jack. Candy Bar, when I went to Edna, Texas to find her later on, then in Brownwood, Texas and all. And I was called when she died because I was friends with them. They always thought I was like an Italian or something back with it. But you have to study Candy Bar, Juanita Phillips, friends with Jack. And then I had another woman kind of involved.
Just 1 second.
Yeah.
Now, did Tana Hill defend Candy
Yeah, Tawny Hill is, Joe Tawny Hill, and I'm not talking about anybody else. I know all about Joe Tawny Hill because remember I studied Ruby. Ruby is going to be defended by Joe Tawny Hill from Jasper. Joe Tawny Hill's father-in-law is a guy who's a congressman from the great state of Virginia, and who's a member like, I would say, a John Birchett type guy. I ain't gonna say any words about with him and all, but Joe Tawny Hill is gonna spring Candy Bar out of prison in summer of '63. The guy that pardons her is a guy named John Connolly. Now back to box 13. Box 13, I'll tell you about Frank Hammer. Frank Hammer,
Wait just a minute.
yeah, go ahead.
You may not have made the connection, but Box 13 is Duval County, in case you didn't catch it. Isn't that right?
Duval County is the county, right? Boy, it's a different county. I don't know if it's Jim West County. It's where Alice is. But Duval County is where George B. Parr is. It's 9 miles away. I've been to his house.
Tell them why in Johnson's election that was important.
That was the key things back. They make the phone calls. And in my research, it was from a guy not over here, not only a couple of blocks away. Judge Mann took all part of it. They make the phone call. They're lacking the votes. The 48 election is the key. Against Coke Stevenson, he is the governor of the great state of Texas. I later fixed medicine for Coke Stevenson's secretary and her son, who was, and her husband. They're from Mount Pleasant, and then Coke Stevenson's secretary was going to name him Coke after him. Coke Stevenson is really a member like the Klan type guys, and he is the deal's back. He is running against Lyndon Johnson, and they're going to make this switch. And again, too, it's all about the deal. Coke Stevenson goes with Frank Hammer, who's involved with the Bonnie and Clyde deal, and he's riding in 48 with him, and they want that box. He pulls the gun on the guy holding the box, and the rest they want it. He's going to be in the front seat in the parade on 11/22/63. John Connolly from Florenceville, which is another town I worked in. So again, too, they want the box. The box is the key. But they don't win that. They change the number of votes. And they've got to bring this thing. They're going to Fort Worth now. This is only not for the U.S. Senator. This is for the Democratic nomination. But in them days, the Republican Party is a zero. It's all the Democratic Party. So in turn, they're going to take it to Fort Worth. And you know, I told you I'm a druggist. It was a druggist that throws the deciding vote that brings him the nomination. The guy's a Klansman who's on the Supreme Court, Hugo Black, rendered a decision back that Coke Stevenson is going to lose. Coke Stevenson, it got shafted on the deal. So here comes old Lyndon. And Lyndon's on town. Now, back to Lyndon. And again, I'll tell you about the picture in my dream and his expression. If Billy Stahl goes down and he talks, Lyndon's down. Don Reynolds is down, and they got Bobby Baker. If Lyndon Johnson goes down, a lot of people in Texas will not have the cement business. Brown and Ruth, who's from Timpson, Texas, and East Texas, where they start off. Then you have all the ones back with it. They have a lot of money invested in Lyndon Johnson. The old guy in my research, I worked in Uvalde, Texas. That's the home of John Nance Cactus Garner. John Nance Cactus Garner, the last phone call that John Fitzgerald Kennedy made on 11/22/63 before he takes a little trip off on his parade, is to Uvalde, Texas. The wish, oh, John Nance Cactus Garner, happy birthday. John Nance Cactus, all right, go ahead.
Robbie, tell him about the Manzels that your wife lived next to. Or Gail, you tell him. I thought you were gone.
This is my wife. She lived next door to old man Bobby.
Yeah, and by the junkyard man.
Knew the kids, knew Bobby Jr.
Yeah, it was Bobby. I saw him one time. He wanted to whack me with it. He was in the federal pen. It's the federal pen in Texarkana.
You talking about the old man?
No, the little Bobby. They call him Little Bobby.
Yeah, I met him.
Yeah, Little Bobby. He's out. He's out now. He whacked the guy.
Nolan just died.
No, yeah, the Manziel. Yeah, the junkyard people. They're in the junkyard business. Rubenstein was in the junkyard business. It goes back to junkyard handlers. But a lot of this stuff, you know, a lot of it goes back with Rubenstein to 1947. The un-American activities. This goes back to 47. He's an informant. He was always part of the Tricky Dick's team. You understand? That's Rubenstein.
For that committee, the
House, and this is what propels Richard Nixon, the son of his dad on the supermarket. Okay, he rides. So he rides all the way to the top. But Ruby's involved with him, and he comes to Dallas. When he's in Dallas, he runs a whole bunch of nightclubs and all back with it. But he's involved with the deals back with this guy, some other guys, some mobster guys. But he is sent there. The guy that really runs the whole ship, the deanery of the mob guy, is Marcello, who takes over after Sam Dollar Bill Corolla when they deport his butt. So you have here. Now I'm gonna jump and I'm gonna just hold it right there, and I'm gonna go back to the general. Go ahead.
Just a second, Paul.
All right.
Let's let Stanley.
Yeah,
talk.
let him talk.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, let's change the mic.
Change the mic. There you go.
And
5 years in Huntsville. My grandmother's father, he spent 5 years for assault, 92 to 97, 18. But on the other side, I have good in my family. Colonel Bean, who knows Colonel Bean?
Peter Ellis.
Peter Ellis Bean, his wife was my aunt. So he, of course, was big. He put down the Freedonian Revolution. He and Sam Houston were big buddies. They parted their ways when he refused to accept the revolution. His wife was Mexican, so he was a leader in the revolution against Spain. But when it came time for Texas in '36 to revolt against the Mexican government, he just set it out. So I think he kind of became an outlaw. But the reason I'm saying it is to say this: you can't separate Louisiana and Texas. The histories are so much connected. I was at Milam last week. You had the Milam Pioneer Days, talking to the leader of the research, the person there, talked about how Jacob and Asa Walker, both died at the Alamo, lived in Milam. And my grandfather always told me, Asa Walker, that his great-great Asa Walker died at the Alamo. So the two histories are so interrelated. I mean, you can't separate Texas history and Louisiana history. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, now basically you follow the Warren Commission that Oswald killed.
Two commissions. Yeah, and my research was much more academic, but I come from an academic background. Emphasis on that which could be measured, not he said, she said, they said, but those things that could be measured, those things that we could go back and establish did happen versus I heard. Because one of the things I do in academics is don't tell me you heard, tell me who told you. You know, because we can do the I said, she said, they said all day long and not back it up. Because you and I both know government has a trail. There's a paper trail. And so if you look long enough, hard enough, if you do genealogy, if you do history, you know you can find a paper trail for most things. Okay, okay, answering, go ahead.
Yeah, tell them about the significance of Lee Harvey Oswald leaving the $180 and the ring the morning that he left to go to the book depository.
Well, I did a lot of research on him, first of all. I said, well, low IQ. No, his IQ was 103. Now, mass killers have low IQs. Assassins have high IQs. And so now 100 is the average IQ. So his IQ was slightly above average. Ability to fire a rifle. No, he was tested twice in the Marines. His first was sharpshooter, and his second test was marksman. For those of you who are military, you know you have 4 levels of marksmanship. You have bolo, marksman, sharpshooter, and expert. So he was a very, very poor shooter. And I'm saying these things to show you.
Very, very poor shooter.
Yeah, he was a poor shooter. I mean, most people shoot either expert or he was shooting a scope. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw things out to say, yes, he was, no, he wasn't. I'm not here to tell you what happened. I'm here to present the facts, and then you tell me what you think happened. Okay, go back to his history, history of a criminal. 12 schools and didn't graduate from high school, lived in numerous homes. Dad died 2 months before he was born, never had a father. He was thrown around from town to town to town, school to school to school. Eventually he dropped out of school, went into the Marines. Now, he was 7 out of 30. So he was much more average in the Marines as far as testing, different schools he went through, different areas of training. So as far as intelligence, he was above average. In every area I researched, I found that his scores were above average.
Okay,
Which,
now, let me ask you this. From what I read, now you'll have to understand, I'm just the moderator here. I'm not an expert. But from what I read, Oswald had a real dislike for America. I mean, when he defected to Russia, the only reason he came back was, I think he thought that he was going to get a real attaboy and acceptance, and he didn't get quite he always wanted to kind of be a great man.
right.
And they didn't stroke him quite enough, so that's why he came back.
2
Now, do you
years,
believe
59
there
to
was a
61.
deal cut between Russia and him to get permission to bring her back? Do you believe that or not?
I don't believe that Kennedy was killed by left wing.
Okay.
because you and I both know this is a very important time in U.S. history. Kennedy's presidency is a turning point in our history. We're going from old dinosaurs, old white men, to a man in the White House with 2 kids. If we think Obama was
the youngest president.
he and Roosevelt were the 2 youngest presidents. Teddy, yes, second. He was 44. Teddy was 41, right? Roosevelt. Teddy.
I'm glad you told me that. I
Right.
didn't know that. 8 months younger. Okay.
So you got to remember what's happening. We're coming out of the big Red Scare, McCarthyism. So America is fearful of the Soviet Union, fearful of Cuba. We're coming out of the Bay of Pigs. Now we have a communist country in our hemisphere. So this is a very important time in U.S. history. A big transition. McCarthyism is no longer, but the effect of McCarthyism, the John Birch Society is getting started. And so we have all these extreme right-wing groups that are getting started. And so we see America, if we think today we're divided as a country, we were divided during the years of President Kennedy.
Yeah, let me stop you just a minute. Some of you will not realize this, and you probably don't, but the state school, before it was the state school, was the Strategic Air Command. And it was a radar base. And the reason Mr. Beavers told me that it was there was because they had not built the one in Alaska yet. And let me just give you a little personal history. When I was 11, my dad and I asked me to go with him to our furniture store. A sonic boom had broken the glass out of our store window. And I haven't looked this up, but the Lufkin Daily pictured me in the paper in my bathrobe in front of the window. You know? But anyway, the January of '62, Mr. Beaver came down to start the state school. Go ahead.
Okay. Like I said, I come here with many questions. I don't come here with a lot of answers because as you investigate this, as you read and do research, you find that with every area you research, you find just as many questions that you find answers. You know, and questions that were not raised in, for example, the route. Why would Oswald have chosen an 1891 rifle with a 4-power scope? I mean, if you know you don't choose a rifle that's a war surplus rifle that's been fired. You don't choose it just a 4-power scope. So a lot of the research that I did on this assassination, the route. You know, they said Roosevelt came in 36. The Roosevelt route. Well, that was Elm Street. But if you look at the pictures of the Kennedy assassination, look at Main Street. People are 12 people deep. Look at the grassy knoll. How many people are on the grassy knoll? Why? Why would you stand there standing on a street, elbow to elbow, can't even see the president, when just a block away is a grassy knoll with about 4 people there? Yes. Yeah. Here's a grassy knoll. You see the police pulling away. Now, again, like I said, I have questions. I don't have answers. Why was the route changed the day of the assassination? Where people were on Main Street, but yet on the grassy knoll on Elm Street, plus you can't get on 35 from Main Street.
That's right.
If you look at the map, you have to get on Elm Street in order to get on 35. And so, like I said, these are questions.
The access road to 35.
You have to get on Houston, get off of Main, get on Houston, and when you turn that sharp curve, you almost have to come to a complete stop, which is an outstanding place for an assassination.
I just wonder about this. He supposedly ordered that rifle with the name
Heidel, right?
This second Oswald just really troubles me. They say there's pictures of people that are taller than Oswald. They call him Oswald and so on.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, do you believe, I have heard recently that Oswald was not there on that floor to shoot him at that time? Someone believes that he was in the cafeteria of the book depository when Kennedy got shot. Have you ever read that?
I read that he was seen exiting the building, and that's why his description was sent out. That's why Tippit recognized Oswald. Without that description, he would not have known who to stop or who to pursue. No, I have not. He also was seen taking what they thought were, he said, what, curtain rods? He was taking a load of curtain rods into the building. So he was seen taking something in the building. He said there were curtain rods, which, of course, if you believe that Oswald did it, was the rifle.
That he told that to Frazier, didn't he, Paul? He told him that morning. What happened was Oswald spent the night with his wife. They were estranged from one another with Marina the night before. And he usually did not do that, and the lady that she lived with was upset over that. Well, on the way into town, he asked him, the man driving him, asked him what that was, and he told him Kurt Rogers. Isn't that correct, Paul?
Yeah, he put him in the back seat.
Kurt
The problem
Rogers,
with
right.
Bewley Frazier was also picked up, and he had a lot of questions on him, thought he was involved with Oswald.
Yeah.
With the deal. He comes on that Thursday night. One of the questions I always asked Marina when he was on Magazine Street, they moved, Ruth. I've dealt with Ruth 2 or 3 different times. I found her in California, Ruth Payne, married to Michael Payne. You got to study, since y'all in the genealogy, study the families of the people involved.
Yeah.
The Paynes. Hold on, let me just finish on your deals back.
I'm gonna let him start back.
No,
Let him
I'm just
finish.
finished about the Paynes and all back.
Yeah,
So it was
okay.
there. I asked her one time, again, it's about the deals, because Ruth is gonna pick her up. There's no cell phones, and Ruth is gonna come to Magazine Street, 2907 Magazine Street, and she's gonna pick them up and they're gonna take them back. Lee Harvey's gonna go from there. He's going off his little trip off into Mexico. But now somebody has to load this so-called deal in the blanket. Follow the blanket. It's like I follow the ring too, for a long time. I always felt like the ring was the key to Oswald. He's going to give up. For some reason, he's taking the ring off, but he wants to reconcile with Marina. Like I said, I know Marina well. Anyway, in the meantime she was manipulated quite a bit in the early points. And it talked again too, just say it's going to be him. Why does a guy named Jack Crichton, C-R-I-T-C-H-O-N, who's an all guy, he's an all game. He went to high school in Shreveport, Redneck City, and C.E. Bird, and he's friends with old the Bushes, him and George. Well, he goes to see, remember y'all listen to my story, he goes to visit with Coke Stevenson, after this thing's back. Jack is part of Army Intelligence. Remember you talking about all your stuff in Lufkin? Army Intelligence. A lot of Army Intelligence ride in the parade. And a lot of them old boys you talked about, they're all drunk. And they have a hangover city. And it's from Kirkland, it's called the Cellar, Fort Worth. That's the front. I used to fix medicine for these people back with flip the cards. Card is called Texas Hold'em and the rest. Now, they didn't just play right here. You go to Dallas Fort Worth. We talk about people with money, and you go to the back rooms. I thought I was going to get whacked one time when I worked in Mockingbird. I went to Campese, Joe Campese. So I'll go back to the back room, I have to go to the bathroom and all back. They send me schooling out. It's another story. But anyway, the meantime it's a card game. But anyway, and I always wanted, I'm friends with people all over the United States. Talked to a guy from New York who interviewed Julie Postal. Julie Postal is the woman who runs the picture show to collect the money and the tickets. She's the one that
You mean at the Texas Theater?
Texas Theater.
Okay.
You look at his timeline on the time, him moving out the deal's back. You mentioned that he's on the second floor, when Truly comes up with Baker, who's a patrolman, and he's drinking a Coca-Cola. And I looked at the timeline to come on back down and get to the thing and get out, but he ain't huffing and puffing, but he's in good shape. My whole key, which I hadn't talked about, is the other side, and I studied that very strong. I had friends that was part on the bulldozers to run down the U.S. Marshals in Oxford, Mississippi in October of 1962 with General Walker. General Walker, born 1909 from Centerville, Texas, is the key. He's another guy that gets really mad because he gets only general I've ever known in U.S. history, because I worked at close to where he's from, the James Baines Jones Hospital in Leesville. We call that Sleevesville, Louisiana. Anyway, so I worked there.
We'll strike that.
No, we ain't gonna strike, but I just call it like it is. That's what the people call it. Anyway, he can tell you that.
Sleevesville.
Yeah, it's called Sleevesville. The Army base. And we talk about the women, we can talk about the women. And that's the Army base, that's another story. But anyway, in the meantime the general. The general is relieved of his command. That never has happened before. This is all about his literature he's given out with the John Birch Society. The Kennedy boys release him of the command. He comes back to the great eyes of Texas, and he's in Dallas. And they're going to run him in 1962 for the governorship. Who else is in the race?
Walker? They run Walker?
Yeah, General Walker.
Now,
John
let me
Birch
ask you this
Society.
question. What was, as you know, Oswald tried to kill Walker.
No, yeah, okay.
What was his, you don't believe that?
No, he did. Marina told me he
What
took
was
his
his
I know everything
motive
about
for
that.
killing Walker? Why did he want to?
It's called a manipulation. And I'm going to tell you about the manipulation. by Waldemar Schmidt. Waldemar Schmidt is a geologist. He's from Nazi Germany. He's from Germany. I have a friend of mine who's from his name is Bill Kelly. He's worked on assassinations for years. He lives in Jersey. He interviewed Waldemar Schmidt in 1995. Waldemar Schmidt is called manipulation by psychological analysis. Waldemar Schmidt was a geologist. He worked for Magnolia Oil, which becomes Gulf Oil. Waldemar Schmidt is friends with George E.D., George the Monticello. Another guy involved with Brother Bush from Midland. He works at Midland, goes to the University of Texas. He's a guy they're going to manipulate Lee Harvey Oswald. How you figure they manipulate it? Well, in the interview is the key, because I said it is back. Me and Marina talked about Waldemar and George E.D. She liked George E.D. She didn't like Jean de Monticello, which is in the fashion design, like your book, right? Here's the Gruder, a Jewish guy in the fashion design. There's a lot more to this story than just one old guy decides going, like you said, going to be a pot shot at the right time. Manipulation starts a long time. The manipulation of Lee Harvey Oswald is at a party. Waldemar Schmidt comes, and they're going to introduce him. Waldemar Schmidt is from Germany. He was an admirer of Adolf Hitler. There was a coup to get rid of Adolf Hitler in 1944. The guy that's part of the coup, along with Rommel to get rid of Adolf Hitler, is a guy named Kurth. Kurth is a psychiatrist. He's part of the deal. He has a son, and him and Waldemar are best of friends. They have a house in Germany. Kurth has, and he goes visit with him quite a bit, and he would do psychoanalysis. If you understand all the so-called psychologists of the world, and you got Jung, and you have Freud, and all, they're all Germans, but just giving it, not off anything else. Just telling you. So Kurth talks to him for 2 hours. And even in all the interviews back with it, he did. He tells Waldemar Schmidt admits to him in 1905 to Bill Kelly is that he psychoanalyzed Lee Harvey Oswald. And Marina is all about this picture thing. She admitted to me, she took the picture, Hunter of Fascists. That's her handwriting. The only person I ever get a birthday card or Christmas card is from Marina. I know her personally. I know her penmanship and all. Kurth. So again, he tells him back, Waldemar Schmidt, they go for a ride, they pick him up. Who in the world from we'll just play this town called Lufkin, Texas. Who from Lufkin, Texas with money, when you mentioned your friends back with the rest, so we can do the lawyers, and I used to own the Finlay House. They ain't gonna associate with nobody that works for a welding company. You understand the class system. Here they come back, and they're gonna get him, and they're gonna pick him up for a little ride. Him and Marina go for a ride with Waldemar Schmidt and George E.D. in a convertible. They ride around.
You talking about
Waldemar Schmidt and George de Monticello. George de Monticello, I studied him quite a bit. I had to go down with George D. George de Monticello is a character. George de Monticello, if you study him, he goes back to Nazi Germany. He goes back, then he comes back.
Was he the one that got Oswald the job with
No, he
the
don't
maps
need no
for the
job.
U-2 planes?
No.
That's Morenschildt, right?
The Morenschildt, that's
Yeah,
right.
okay,
George
all right,
E.D.
okay, all right, go ahead.
George E.D. He has a lot of connections all the way back to old Jackie who decided the car. So there's a lot more to this story than that has. So back to the other ones back. The shot. I have looked into that shot because they leave after. Marina tells me the Monticello comes with old Jean on the next night and said, how could you miss? They didn't set him up. He misses the shot. A lot of people say it's the guy at the Mormon church and all. And I studied that for 40 years, why be sealed. But again, too, Waldemar Schmidt used a psychoanalysis. He says, if they'd have killed Hitler in 44, it'd have saved all these lives. Now, Oswald went to a lot of the meetings. And it's called the right-wing meetings with the John Birch. The John Birch Society are the ones that shoot at Adlai Stevenson in October of 1963. Johnny come home, John Kennedy does not look at the signs. They beat the crap out of him, and he was spitting in his face and all, and this is Adlai Stevenson. The guy that does that is all the general's friends of the general, but the general don't go there. But in 1962, he goes there when James Meredith is trying to get out, goes into University of Mississippi. James Meredith was on the tape. James Meredith got to deal back. So you got to kind of go back with now. I can't take you into Hoffa and the rest. They're all involved. But go ahead, though.
Okay, go ahead, Stanley. We interrupted you.
No, interrupt, yeah.
Well, I'm not sure where I need to start. One of the things I found so strange is 42 groups have been investigated as being possible assassins. So when you have that many groups involved, 214 people have been charged or investigated for being involved in some conspiracy. Second paragraph, why do we need to believe in conspiracies? From 55 years, the lowest percent has been 61%, the highest 76%. But no time has America's opinion of the Kennedy assassination has been below 61%. So for some reason, America believes in conspiracies, especially this conspiracy. Also, if you notice, 95% of that which you read supports conspiracy. So you're not going to find very many books, articles that do not support some kind of conspiracy.
Is that because that sells?
Some suggest, and I looked at of course I taught psychology for 30-something years, there's a need to believe in conspiracies. Conspiracies explain answers, provide connections. When we look at any kind of study, anything, we need to connect the dots, so to speak, and conspiracies give us the power. There's a feeling that comes with us when we know, and we have a desire to know. So there's also
a feeling that we know something that someone else doesn't know?
or there may be, they might know, but we know more. Or, you know,
Okay.
my belief, I'm strong in my belief, that gives me, and that empowers me, you know, versus someone who's not strong in his belief and so forth.
You know, another thing that gets me about Oswald is that, you know, he was supposed to be a Marxist, but you see him with those pictures of him with those Cuban exiled right-wingers. And then he turns around and he's handing out leaflets for fair play for Cuba against that stuff over somebody. You know, it just...
But what happened there, look, who put Castro in office? We did. He came on the Ed Sullivan Show. He was a hero in America. We wanted Batista out. So we put Castro in office. And we woke up one morning and found out that he aligned himself with the Soviet Union, Khrushchev. It surprised America. So we brought this on ourselves. So when you see, again, so many things have changed. I mean, so many areas change. I mean, just with every area of investigation, you come up with more and more questions. You know, so, but we put Castro in office.
Is it possible that it's too difficult to believe that there would be two crackpots, one Oswald and one Ruby, who acted alone? Is that too unbelievable? That could be true.
Okay.
I'm not saying it is true, but that it could be true.
As I looked into this assassination, I came up with more and more questions. When I became convinced that this person did it or this group did it, there were so many people had so many reasons to kill Kennedy.
That's right.
So many people, so many groups.
14 there for
I
us
mean,
that, you know,
Lady Bird is one of the chief stockholders in Bell Helicopter. I mean, in the Vietnam War, now the Pentagon Papers suggested Kennedy did not want, correction, he wanted to pull America out of Nam. He knew we couldn't win in Nam, but he did not want to be the first president to lose a war. So the Pentagon Papers show that he had no plans of pulling the U.S. military out of Vietnam, which is one of the theories of why he had to be killed. Because in 1960, when Eisenhower left office, his farewell address, what was the big warning he gave toward the American people? Right, they're taking over government, and they'll do what they can to make war. And so that was an argument about, you know, the military being involved in the Kennedy assassination. So there's so many groups out there that has so many reasons to kill Kennedy.
Okay. Now let me shift it. Will you give the mic to Paul?
Sure.
Okay. I wanna ask the question. You know, two biggies that had a reason to kill Kennedy was J. Edgar Hoover and Johnson, because it became apparent that Johnson may be taken off the ticket for 64 now from the November 64 election. And Hoover, he was also going to replace Hoover. So Paul, answer the question, why do you believe or not believe that Johnson or Hoover could have killed Kennedy?
Well, who was part of the cover-up? Johnson has, if he's not on the ticket, Terry Sanford for North Carolina is going to be on the ticket. He really wants Sanford on the deals. He has no longer the connection. The only reason he's coming to Texas, and he goes not only to Dallas, he's over there in Houston. He's also in El Paso. He's on the tour, and his next drop-off is going to be in Austin, Texas. But the best place is home. If you follow sports, the best place is the home team. Home team is right there where it's going to take place. And also, there was all the attempts to get rid of him, maybe in Chicago or maybe one time in Miami. He thinks he's got to have it. He wants to sell up, but he knows they're going to dump him. Hoover is going to get dumped because Hoover is past a mandatory age. He has problems with Lyndon, he has problems with the Kennedys. They don't like Hoover. Hoover does not like them. Hoover's part of the cover-up all the way. So you got to have Hoover and the FBI. The FBI had their own investigations. The Warren Commission gave it to who he wanted. Hoover has it all back. If you look back with Oswald, why is Oswald, when he confronts Beringer in the confrontation with the fight, who does he call for? He calls back Dutch. Dutch is Dutch Murat, who's a bookie for the little man Carlos Marcella. They bring in a guy who's a state representative, who's another Italian guy. Then he makes a phone call, and the FBI goes to the jailhouse with Lee Harvey Oswald. The FBI sure ain't going to come about a damn fight right in front of the Trade Center. That's another key. Like I said, I've worked this thing for 40 years. I know people all over the United States that worked this thing here, and I'm like you. I can't put it, but a conspiracy means there's 2 or more people involved. So if you start back with Lee Harvey Oswald getting killed by Jack Ruby, why did Jack? Jack didn't care nothing about the woman, Jackie, who gets out of Dodge in the car back. And if you look back, again, he didn't care about that. He's not even watching. He even tells the people, I didn't even watch the parade. But in my research, I really believe he has cancer. Maybe. But hold on, he don't die from that. You know how Jack Ruby goes down? You know who told me this? I'm working in Texarkana, and the guy comes in, and I'm going to fish this dude. His brother-in-law, Lieutenant Day, holds up the gun. And this is the so-called Corona gun. But it's not. It's a Mauser. They all say it's a Mauser. And the fingerprints he has with Lee Harvey Oswald, they go to Dallas because they're going to wait. Remember, after he's going to die, Oswald, they wait. They're going to make a trip. Guy from Lufkin, Texas, is one of the pallbearers, and they're going to take the print off this dude. So you got to look a little bit more to the deals. Who has more to gain? Number one, the guy has to gain, and I'll say there's 2 facets to this thing, is Lyndon Johnson. He's not on the ticket. That means George and Herman Ruth ain't going to get them contracts, and all the guys going to be gone. That's all the contracts. Vietnam is all about contracts. It's about Bell Helicopter. Oh, by the way, Lady Bird owns Commercial Solvents. Commercial Solvents. Commercial Solvents, S-O-L-V-E-N-T.
Like Agent Orange?
No, Commercial Solvents is Billy Saul Estes. That's about the fertilizer tanks in Pecos, Texas. Like I said, you got to get deep into this thing. So that's one side. Hoover, that's his next door neighbor. Both of them have a lot of perversions, sexual perversions, because I work in a place called Tyler, and I fix medicine for a pimp. And the old pimp had a place in Dallas. So you got to know a little bit more about the characters and about all they go. And look who they associate with, birds of a feather. So they're best of friends all the way from 1936. Have you studied really Hoover? You got to study Hoover, whole thing. And Hoover and his boyfriend, Clyde the Glide Tolson, and all back. Number 2, you talk about the records? The records? I tried to find the old girlfriend, the old secretary who starts with Hoover. She had moved off to Florida. I wanted them records. After Hoover goes, they knocked Hoover off. Hoover gets killed. And then if you look deep into this thing, you have to look into the deals back. It took me 20-something years to find the lawyer involved with Estes. His name is Douglas Caddy, lived in Houston, Texas. He represents the Watergate people. If you understand Watergate, you can understand Kennedy, because Nixon and all. And they're going to set up Tricky Dick, and he's going to go down, the door's open. So if you study him, you're going to start falling back. But you got to go back to 47, like he was saying. You got to go deep. Tricky Dick wants that job. He wants that job back. But who does he associate with? And after old Tricky Dick, he's playing golf with the mob guys over there in Palm Beach. So you have to see who these guys are, who supports them to win. So it gets pretty deep into politics. But again, too, you got to have a scapegoat. Why do you have the scapegoat? They know everything about on you dealing with the scapegoat. They know he lived on Bourbon Street, and his mama. If you have to study his mama, you said he's right. He does die. Lee Harvey Oswald lived on Bourbon Street. That's Duchess sister, okay? No, the Duchess' wife's sister, Lillian. So you got to study these people kind of strong. And then again, too, he's a bookie. He dies of a heart attack. He's off on a prayer mission. He's Catholic like me, and that's when he has a heart attack in '67 before he goes. So now the guy we ain't studying is Jim Garrison. I studied Jim Garrison a long time. I was friends with Louis Avon, his chief investigator, and all back with it. So you got to study deals back, and I had to study Garrison. So again, to the conspiracy and all, he brings it all back and all. But he's a publicity guy. So you have to understand that, but it's also, just like in the days of cowboys and Indians, you have smoke screens. We can smoke it back to the CIA. We can smoke it all away from us. We never touch home. You understand? Go ahead.
Let me ask you this question. One thing, you have to understand, I've never dealt much in this, but one of the things that surprised me is that the CIA had a lot of previous contact with Oswald. As a matter of fact, Oswald's mother was investigated because she mailed a check to him while he was in Russia. When he got back, they had interviews with him. 2 agents had interviews with him. So they had previous contact. Let me go, I'm going to make a little bit of diversion. My daughter's first husband is related to J.D. Tippit, distantly. And the next thing I need to tell you is that there's a man in Lufkin who videoed the man who drove Oswald to work that day. He has it on videotape.
Well, why would he want to, Dickie? Why we want to video Oswald leaving from Irving, Texas? Taking.
No. Of Oswald driving from Marina's house to the depository that day.
Why would a man, again, too? My question is, why would a man want to interview or watch another man in a car? What's in? But it's a setup. Oh, I see what you're saying. No, I get what you're saying.
Working for Frontline.
Oh, Frontline. Okay.
He's the guy that interviewed Nellie Conley. Nellie Conley on this video says about Kennedy, I don't know why they killed that boy. Okay? And also, he interviewed the man who saw him in the Texas Theater, an employee at the Texas Theater. He has all of those on video. I had hoped he would be here today with those videos. He lives in Lufkin and he works at the college. Yes. What's his name? Reg Reynolds. Nancy Reynolds. Yeah. You had a question?
Allegedly, Oswald and Ruby knew each other.
I definitely think the word it goes back. A key to it is a guy named Dave Ferry. Dave Ferry is a character. He's a character involved with Eastern Airlines. He's a homosexual back, and he's friends with Bannister. God Bannister. I went to Northeast in Monroe. God Bannister's wife Mary lived about a block or 2 away from me. Bannister's brother Ross taught at Northeast when I went to Northeast. He's from Oak Grove, Louisiana. If you study Bannister and Camp Deals and you talk about all the fair play players, you have to understand what is fair play for Cuba is all about. It's an FBI front to find out who is going to be involved with the communist sympathizers. That's all the junk. In December '63, c'est tout for jour, it's the French word, it's all. So Bannister's there, and again, I was friends with Ivan. They find the pamphlets inside his apartment. They're going to get rid of Guy Bannister. Guy Bannister is a member of the Klan, the White Council, and all. He's friends with Leander Perez. He's friends with the general. The general comes there only a couple of days before the Jung Hotel. You got to study all these characters. I ran for Congress, like I said. I was supported by the Klan. There were other people back. Ned Touchstone and all back. That's the guys with the Citizens Council. Guy Smith, brings me a book about Barry Gordy. You have to understand all the makings of what's going on. Like you said, there's a lot of them back. But again, Bannister, real fast. So Bannister is an FBI. I got to know Joseph Dwyer. Joseph Dwyer is an old man, 90 years old. He worked for Bannister as an investigator. Joseph Dwyer later lives in West Monroe. My wife's from West Monroe, and I got to know him. He wanted to give me the papers. The old man died. He was 90 years old. Still doing investigations at 90. When he would answer the phone call at Bannister's office, it would be the head man, J. Edgar Hoover's calling Bannister. That was his best friend. They go back to the 30s. It goes back to the time of communism. So you have to understand the people of the FBI. And you have to understand how strong they are to control the game. If Johnson has no involvement, why does he seal all the records? Until 1991, they bring out the Freedom Act to start releasing some. Old Trump, the other day, tried to get some out. He ain't getting them all. He said, national security. What national security? So you think about national security and all back, and then even Trump to this day. We tried very hard. In old Jimmy's time, Jimmy Carter from Georgia, Jimmy Carter wouldn't release it. It's 76. That's when the church committee. Now, they're going to all go down in 1978. That's when they're going to get rid of Johnny Roselli, who was at the Cabana. Johnny Roselli.
House on Select.
78. That's what brings about. Boy, they don't want that. That's when they're going to get rid of Valencia and all. But Dave Ferry's the key to it. They're going to get rid of him. They got to get rid of them all. And they didn't kill him. And the guy's going to involve this in the book I gave him back. And he talks about John Melvin Liggett is going to be a guy who's going to eliminate a lot of people. They got to eliminate all the people. So if a conspiracy, again, is 2 or more. If you have 2. So it only takes 2 to make a conspiracy, 2 or more. So if you don't have, and again, back to Rubenstein. Number one, he's not really caring.
About 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Look, but real fast, I'm gonna let him finish up. But real fast on the 10 minutes. If Rubenstein is going to kill him because he loves the deals back, we had psychomotor seizures back with it, the spur of the moment deal. Who lets that dude in? Again, follow the women. He's going to be at the right time. They hold him up. They hold Oswald up, you know, about the shirt and all. And a guy named Humes. Humes is a guy who works at the post office. He's the postmaster like y'all have over here in the deals back. Oh, there's a postmaster involved. There's an old man I didn't find back in the town. And he was the postmaster, the United States of America. And he lives up the road not too far from here, on the other side of Crockett.
Now, many
Yeah, go ahead.
Some people believe that Ruby owed a debt to the mob, and that's why he killed Oswald.
No, he did. He owed the IRS. It was like so many thousand. In this day, it was quite a bit. But also, if he does have the cancer, he knows about the deal. He has a lot of medical bills. Also, he's the only guy who had the inside to get to him. The woman that cut my hair was.
Police knew him well.
For Ralph Hall. Ralph Hall was Rubenstein's partner. She says in the summer of 1963 that the candy bar comes along with Ruby to see Ralph Hall. Ralph Hall, there's some calls by Rubenstein to Ralph Hall on the night before. Ralph Hall says, don't do the kid. And all he does to hit anyway. Ralph Hall takes over the castle. You have to study him
You
out.
mean they had a hit on, they had?
No, it's the killing of Oswald. You got to get rid of him. So, and again, too, well, he ain't going to talk. You're going to get rid of Ava, his sister, and the rest.
Yeah.
And now, real fast on Tannehill. How do you bring in Tannehill to the game? Tannehill is there. In the great state of Texas, it's called the client-lawyer relationship. When you're in the big house now, only person you can talk to is your lawyer. Joe Tannehill is from Jasper. One time a guy comes, I'm going to this lawyer's office. The lawyer owes me some money in Louisiana. Go in there, go inside his office. I want to collect some of his money from the lawyer. And this guy is all sick with his suit and tie. I said, where you come from? He says, I'm from Texas. I said, what you doing here? Well, I got to get a big boy Dan here. He's going to represent us because we can't practice in the great state of Louisiana. We need Dan. I said, who you work for? I said, for my famous lawyer. I said, who's that? Joe Tannehill. He said, defended Rubenstein. I said, he didn't defend Rubenstein. Was Bella. I said, no. Tannehill did. He said, why Tannehill? Because Tannehill has a license in Texas. The other guy cannot appear in court and represent a guy. This is where Tannehill. But Tannehill's also the one that springs candy bar in the summer of '63. The guy gives a pardon, what we say in Louisiana, is the guy from Floresville who's involved in 48, and he's also in the parade. He makes a statement, John Conley.
Yeah.
Study him a little bit further back, even after the parade and the whole works, and about the Treasury Department and Tricky Dick and all the other stuff. Study his career, and he loses it all. I worked in that town of Floresville. The woman who was typing for me in that town, at that HEB, she got his big Bonneville. So study the characters that are involved. Remember, you can rise to the top, power, you can have all the money in the world, and you can lose your soul for whatever gains you have.
Yeah, there's a story about that, but I'm not.
Amen.
I might offend
So
some Democrat
now,
friends.
Dickie, let
Stanley,
Reverend Fletcher finish.
Why don't you hand the
hand it off.
mic to him? Stanley, we hope.
I said, you finish me off there, Stanley.
Yeah, there you go. Stanley, you better talk some here.
Talk fast.
Well, I may lose my friendship here.
Quickly say why some were suspects and some are not. The sheet you have for LBJ, everything I read about LBJ and Kennedy, they had a great relationship. They thought that were now Bobby and LBJ did not.
Wait, now Kennedy and Johnson
Had a good relationship. But remember now, different cultures, Northeast and the South, are very conservative, very progressive or liberal, whatever. But everything I read about the relationship of the two men was positive.
Okay, just a second. Robbie, come forward. Robbie told me I have this book, but I have not read it. So, Robbie,
Actually, haven't read it all.
tell them about what David Halberstam says in The Best and the Brightest, and then we'll come back.
Well, there's, all this, like you were just disputing that, but there's all this theory that.
Hold that microphone up higher.
Okay. Johnson was on the ticket just strictly Kennedy's to carry to get the Southern vote. And Halberstam wrote this book, The Best and the Brightest, and what that's talking about is the cabinet that Kennedy recruited when he was elected. And it pretty well talks about, how they treat LBJ like about a third-class citizen the whole time. Well, when Kennedy dies, here's Johnson can appoint his cabinet, but he took the role at first. He wanted, of course, exit interview or talk to him, whatever. Well, the key man that Kennedy's really liked was a guy named George Bundy. And I forget He went to Groton, or however you pronounce it, school, Connecticut, or wherever it is. And anyway, I guess the others left. Probably some of them quit immediately since they knew LBJ was going to be their boss. And but George Bundy, LBJ would go to the restroom, had a little chair. He would sit there by the commode when he was relieving himself, and that's when he would like to talk to McGeorge Bundy at that time about.
He made Bundy talk to him there.
Right, that's what Halberstam said. Now, most of the
I have
book-
that book. I'll look that up.
A lot of the book is before the assassination and then after the assassination.
Okay.
But
All right.
that was interesting. You were talking about Coke Stevenson. My grandfather was in the lumber business, and he was a big supporter of Coke in the Duval, the graveyard vote.
Yeah.
And there's a guy here named A.E. Cudley. I wasn't even born.
Al Cudley.
Yeah, Al Cudley.
He moved from Houston.
I think he was a little Marcus, but anyway,
He what?
he lived over there on Marcus Street, I think. I can't remember when I was a kid. I rode my bike down there.
Yeah.
My grandfather died when I was 6. But Cudley, when, who's the guy out of New Orleans?
Carter's little man, Marcel.
No, not Marcellus.
Garrison.
but Garrison.
Yeah.
Jim Garrison.
Jim Garrison was coming out with his stuff, 3 or 4 years after the assassination. He had contacted Cudley. Cudley was a politician. I don't know if he was a state or federal representative. But soon thereafter, he told, LBJ, of course, knew him real well too, Cudley. And he contacted, LBJ contacted Cudley after he found out Cudley had been talking to Garrison and wanted to know what he was going to do, basically. And Cudley said, well, I want to tell the truth. And I don't know what the matter was, but it was going to be kind of indicting to LBJ or somebody in his line. And Cudley died, I think, downtown in one of the restaurants, choking on a steak about a few days later. Don't know. Sounds like he died by accident, but he did
Now,
die.
he also had connections with Kirby, John Henry Kirby. He worked for Kirby. John Henry Kirby in Houston. He moved up here in 1919 to Lufkin from Houston.
Oh, Cudley.
Cudley, yeah.
No, Manziel, old man Manziel.
Yeah, this is Bobby.
He married Marcellus' sister, right, Nancy?
I don't know who he married that woman, I don't know.
I think old man Bobby, the Lebanese boxer.
Yeah, Lebanese, that's right, Lebanese is the boxer,
He
yeah.
married Carlos Manziel's sister.
Oh, yeah,
Later.
a good connection.
All right, okay, Stanley, I know you believe we're not ever gonna give it back to you. Take off.
Yeah, give it to Stanley to wrap it up. Wrap it up.
Stanley pulling people out of the crowd.
You have in front of you, it gets ridiculous. Marilyn Monroe's death, Joe DiMaggio killed Kennedy. They were only married, 8 months, 7 months?
But you know, he put graves on, he put roses on her
He
graves.
loved her, but it came out that she wouldn't wear clothes in the house, and she refused to take a bath, and embarrassing information that he gave out. So again, some of the conspiracies, like I said, I looked at every conspiracy I could find. Some of them got very ridiculous. You have those in front of you. The CIA, of course, the Bay of Pigs, we've talked about it. Kennedy was assured by the CIA that once the nationalists got into the Bay of Pigs, that the people of Cuba would rise up against Castro. Opposite happened. They backed Castro. So there was division between the CIA and Kennedy. Kennedy threatened the CIA, said something to the effect of, I'll get back at you.
And he fired Dulles.
The-
Fired Dulles. Alan Dulles, the head of it.
Cuban nationalists, the exiles, because because Kennedy didn't back them up, didn't give them support. He didn't call in the Air Force. They expected Kennedy to call in the Air Force. He didn't. And the nationalists were wiped out by
He
Castro.
stranded them because of that. Yeah.
They were stranded, left to die, left to be arrested, whatever. There's so many mob theories. The Rat Pack, Joe DiMaggio. What was the one about?
Sam Giancana.
Yeah, the Rat Pack.
Steve Martin.
Yeah, Kenny was supposed to go to Sinatra. Last moment, he went someplace else. Sinatra
He went to
was
Bing
Crosby, right. So now he's gonna kill him because he snubbed him, didn't come spend the night with him. So we get into these theories conspiracy theories that are very minimal, that you wouldn't go kill a president just because he decided to go stay someplace else at night.
Yeah.
And so, again, there were 13 major theories. There were many, many, many minor theories. Release of classified documents. Dickie had mentioned President Trump for national security has determined that the year 2021, right, about 3 years from now, the last of the Kennedy papers will be released. Even though there's an agreement, he said because of security, the national security would be questioned if the papers were released now. So according to the news, 2021 will be the last year of the Kennedy papers. So hopefully that year everything will come out on the table and so forth. Conspiracy theories on the back, again, about Oswald. Again, does he fit the a profile of a assassin? So in some ways, yes. Being background, being very deviant, at the same time scored on the upper end in the military, and so everyone disagrees on Oswald himself as whether or not he was a theorist. Any questions? Like I said, the rifle.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Fred.
your opinions on this.
Fred, why don't you come up here? Come up here into the microphone, because Bob has a hearing problem, okay?
This will be quick, but have you read this book by Barr McClellan? I've got a personal interest because he puts the blame on Ambassador Edward Clark. And
That's a new one.
yeah, and they squashed this book, and I think he may be able to answer things for you.
No, wait, let me stop you right there. He knew personally Clark because he's a forester and Clark was his client.
Yeah, and I sold some timber for Ambassador Clark in some Augustine. He came over a couple times and talked, and I drove him around. But anyway, the one thing that I got out of this, well, two things, is McClellan, if this is correct, was saying that Clark basically admitted it to him. But the one thing in here, and I found it in the book, is, and you said you like to go by hard facts. This says that in the depository window, they found the fingerprint, and the way, I guess the FBI identifies fingerprints, there weren't enough matching points, but he said whatever the connection with French investigators, they said in France there were enough matching points in that fingerprint to identify that person as Johnson's man going back to, I guess, box 13, which I didn't know much about.
No, he's not involved with box 13. He's involved with, he's a University of Texas graduate. He went to high school with Woodrow Wilson, graduated in 1939.
What's his name?
His name is Mac Wallace, Malcolm Wallace.
Oh.
I worked his case. It's running off the road. Mac Wallace was the guy, he actually kills John Kinzer.
Killed somebody for
He
John
kills John
Kinzer.
Kinzer. John Coffers, the lawyer who's involved with your boy, Ed Clark and their firm in Austin, Texas, is the one that gets Coffer off.
And let me say this, locally, I had a conversation with a man who would not come because he was afraid he would be sued. And he maintains that there is a recording of Billy Saul Estes planning this. And he maintains that this man, Malcolm Wallace, was one of the trigger men.
Malcolm Wallace is the guy who does the prints. Nathan Darby did the fingerprint thing back. I know all these characters, Walt Brown, all these other people involved. This crazy Joan Mellon, who I've dealt with, wrote lots of books on Garrison and the rest. And she debunks a lot of different kind of things back with different things. She's a character. I worked that case, with it. So Mac Wallace in law, again, took all these points that Doug Caddy, who goes, he's a friend of mine, he's a lawyer from Houston. Doug Caddy, I tried to find for 20 years. He's the one that brings us up back in 1984, and this is all the points back from the killing of John Kinzer all the way to Josepha
We got
Johnson.
2 minutes. Okay.
And real fast, and all the accountants involved with Estes, knows all the people's back. It's all about the tapes. Barr McClellan wants the tapes now with Estes, wanting to help him obtain the tapes. The tapes is there. The tapes is between Billy Saul Estes and Cliff Carter. Cliff Carter is a guy that's on Air Force One. He has the glasses, looks like Barry Goldwater. The guy who I tried to find before he died is a guy his name is Brooks. And Brooks was living out by Jasper, Texas, same place that Joe Tannehill was. Brooks is the guy that winks at Johnson. Now, no man where I come from Louisiana winks at another man unless he's on the left-hand side or number 2, he's a conniver. And this is the wink. Also, key to this whole thing is the taking over the presidency by Lyndon Johnson on an hour and a half after the deal's back. And this is on Air Force One. They bring Sarah Hughes, Cliff calls her, and he brings Sarah Hughes to do this do the Bible. He's got old Jackie on the side, right there. They don't wait. Again, the vice president, he can't take over the deals back. You got to have the ceremony all back. He don't wait. He wants to take command right then and there before that Air Force plane goes. That's the key to the whole thing. Back with Johnson and his friends. So now he is taking over. Who can control the media? So the media is the president and Jack Valenti. Jack Valenti is his buddy. Jack Valenti is a guy who's over, like Ronald Reagan, he becomes president of Screen Actors Guild in Hollywood. A little bit more to the game.
Now, let me say this. One thing you have to understand in that time period is that the Kennedys had the media in their hip pocket.
The Easton.
I mean, you know, for example, one of my favorite stories is that they asked Kennedy one time how Pierre Salinger estimated crowds, and to defuse the situation, Kennedy said, well, what Pierre does is he counts the number of nuns and multiplies by 1,000. But he was a media darling. I mean, Kennedy was a media darling, so that would not go away with the assassination. You know, Manchester came out with the books, and there were many books. Go ahead.
I heard about some deal in Nevada, and they were over at, I can't think of the actor's name, or anyway, Peter Lawford, I think.
Yeah, he was related to the Kennedys.
And they were all, the Secret Service thought it was a howling coyotes howling, and they went over and looked, and there was a bunch of naked people, and Kennedy was one of them in a swimming pool, and of course you never heard nothing about all that stuff.
Well, now let me say this. This came out in O'Reilly's book that Kennedy every day at 1 o'clock swam naked in the White House. And some of the female aides swam with him. 2 of them swam with him frequently. On one occasion, Jackie was about to come in, and they had to find a way to stop her from coming in there. So there were women in the White House. There were a lot of things like that.
Remember, television put Kennedy in office. The debate with Nixon.
That's right.
Without television, Nixon would have been president.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we're going to have to stop.